thing they never tell you about the best day of your life is that it can also be the worst. My worst came wrapped in white silk, delivered with a smug, sickening smile, right in front of 300 of our closest friends and family. I was standing there, a little sweatier than I'd like to admit, under the Tuscan sun. Because yes, my fiancée, Sarah, had insisted on a destination wedding that cost more than my first condo, waiting for her to finish her vows. Everything was perfect, the kind of perfect that made my wallet weep but my heart swell. Then, she looked me dead in the eye, and instead of saying, "I take you to be my lawfully wedded husband," she said, "I take you, Mark, and your controlling, miserable little life, and I throw it all back in your face. I'm canceling this wedding. In fact, I'm canceling us. And by the way, I'm taking the honeymoon money, every last dime. Ciao, Bella." The collective gasp from the guests was a physical force, like a wave hitting me. But the real shock, the one that cracked my calm facade, wasn't the public humiliation. It was the moment I realized her smug, sickening smile meant she was actually winning. I didn't just lose a fiancé that day. I realized I had been strategically, meticulously played for over a year. And the financial fallout? That was only just beginning. To understand the chaos, you have to appreciate the quiet, calculated normalcy that preceded it. Sarah and I met 5 years ago at an investment banking seminar. She was quick-witted, stunningly beautiful, and had this razor-sharp ambition that I genuinely admired. I was successful, stable, and let's be honest, probably a little too trusting. I run a small, profitable tech consulting firm. I'm a numbers guy, a risk assessor, but apparently, my antennae fail when the risk is wearing a little black dress. Our engagement had been a whirlwind of luxury. Sarah had a taste for the finer things, which I was happy to provide. The ring, a 3-carat cushion cut. The house, a beautiful colonial in the suburbs, paid for almost entirely by me, though her name was on the deed for tax purposes, my lawyer would later scoff. The wedding, Tuscany, Italy. A 5-day, all-expenses paid spectacle for 300 people. My best man, Dave, a brutally honest software developer, had tried to warn me. "Mark, she talks about your equity more than your future." He'd texted me once. I'd laughed it off. That's just Sarah's dry humor, mate. She's ambitious. But the warning signs, in hindsight, were screaming louder than a siren. About 6 months into the engagement, Sarah insisted on a joint bank account for all shared expenses. She opened it, put in a symbolic initial deposit of $1,000, and then I systematically funded it with roughly $10,000 a month for wedding costs, furnishings, travel, and lifestyle enhancements. I told myself it was fair. I made more money. I didn't notice how systematically she was shifting all of our recurring bills, her car lease, her personal credit card payments, her rent from her old, empty apartment, onto this shared account. The house, our marital home, was another key piece. We closed on it 4 months before the wedding. Sarah, the master of persuasive finance, convinced me that to simplify the eventual transfer and to save on land transfer tax, we should put the down payment, $250,000, from my personal, non-commingled accounts. Her name went on the deed. Her reasoning? It shows the bank we're united front, sweetie. United front. What a joke. In the final 72 hours before we boarded the flight to Italy, I felt an unease I couldn't place. Everything was arranged. Everything was paid for. Sarah was giddy. Too giddy, maybe. "You won't believe how much I've saved us, Mark. All those early bird discounts and vendor negotiations," she'd chirped, showing me a spreadsheet. I glanced at the numbers. $350,000 for the venue, caterer, and travel. An additional $50,000 for the honeymoon suite on the Amalfi Coast. All paid from that joint account, funded by me. I remember thinking, it's a lot, but it's worth it for the love of my life. The reality was, I had just finished funding her entire escape fund. The revelation of the scheme, the sound that followed her public, aggressive, and frankly, theatrical cancellation of the wedding was not anger, not grief. It was my calm, methodical brain switching into emergency management mode. I watched Sarah stride past the stunned guests, her dress billowing. She walked directly to a waiting black sedan, not even looking back. A guest, my cousin Jessica, leaned over to me. "Mark, I think that was Greg driving the car," older business mentor. The man she claimed was helping her launch her own financial consulting firm. The man she spent every Thursday evening with at networking dinners. I took a deep breath, thanking the universe for the sheer volume of high-quality Italian wine that was currently silencing my guests. My first thought wasn't about the heartbreak. It was about the money. I pulled my best man, Dave, aside. Dave, bless his cynical heart, immediately got it. Mark, you need to call your lawyer right now. Not your family lawyer, your corporate shark. This isn't a breakup. This is a hostile financial takeover. I walked away from the stunned silence, past the untouched wedding cake, and into a back office of the villa. My hands were shaking, but my voice was steady. I called Eleanor Vance, the corporate litigation attorney who had once saved my company from a predatory buyout. She was expensive, but she was a viper in a Chanel suit. Eleanor, it's Mark. My fiancé just canceled our wedding, publicly, in Tuscany. The immediate issue is the joint account and the house deed. I need a freeze order on the joint account and an emergency injunction on the house immediately. Can you do this from New York? Eleanor, thankfully, skips straight to the strategy. Mark, the joint account is trouble. You funded it. She drained it. But the house? That's where we strike. Did she ever live there with you? For how long? 4 months. We closed on it 4 months ago. Good. In your state, that's not enough time to establish a common law marriage or significant spousal rights without a formal marriage certificate. We have a shot. Did you have a prenup? I swallowed, the irony of the situation burning my throat. We were signing it the day after the wedding. Eleanor let out a noise that sounded like a cat choking on a hairball. Of course you were. Mark, here's what's happening. She executed a fiancé fraud. She coerced you into commingling funds and transferring assets under the guise of an imminent marriage, knowing she was going to back out at the last possible minute to make a clean getaway with the maximum amount of cash before any legal marriage protections kicked in. She gave me a list of instructions. Change the locks on the house immediately. My assistant, bless her soul, was on a flight to the US within the hour with a locksmith. Pull every financial record for the last 18 months. Texts, emails, joint account statements. Do not talk to Sarah. Do not respond to any text, email, or social media message. Let her think she's won the silence. I spent the next 3 days, the days that were supposed to be my honeymoon, in the villa office, wearing a borrowed t-shirt and staring at spreadsheets. My guests, meanwhile, were enjoying the prepaid wine and pasta, a bizarre, dark-humored memorial for my lost love and cash. Sarah, meanwhile, had gone silent. Until the legal letters started flying. She sued me. Not for breach of promise, which, in a delicious twist, my lawyer said she committed, but for half the equity in the house and a return of gifts totaling over $100,000, claiming emotional damages and financial distress. Her lawyer, a theatrical man named Mr. Sterling, sent a demand letter, which Eleanor simply called pure theater. They're trying to scare you into settling, Mark. They know she has a weak case, but they're betting on the fact that you want the scandal to go away. We don't settle. We go for the throat. Eleanor's strategy was brilliant and brutal. She didn't argue against her claims. She went after the intent. She filed a lawsuit for fraudulent inducement to marry and unjust enrichment. We argued that Sarah had entered the relationship and the engagement with the express intent of financially exploiting me, only to bail at the last minute to avoid the legal scrutiny of a divorce proceeding. The key pieces of evidence were: she canceled the wedding literally hours before the marriage certificate was signed, after all major assets were transferred or paid for. The paper trail. Eleanor's forensic accountant showed how Sarah's entire pre-engagement debt load, car, cards, student loans, was systematically transferred and paid off using the joint account I funded, the house deed. The transaction was presented as a necessity for the marriage, not a joint investment. The $250,000 down payment came solely from my premarital funds. We had photos and texts, subtly provided by Dave's network, showing Sarah and Greg enjoying a luxury cruise, booked the same week as the Tuscan wedding, confirming they were already in a new relationship prior to the cancellation. The mandatory mediation hearing was the first time I saw Sarah since the wedding day humiliation. She strode in wearing a power suit, looking flawless and utterly entitled. Greg, naturally, was waiting outside the door. I kept my eyes on the table. Calm, methodical. Mr. Sterling started with a florid speech about my alleged controlling nature and how Sarah had been forced to flee a toxic relationship. Then, Eleanor spoke, and her voice, calm and low, filled the room. With respect, Mr. Sterling, this is not a personal grievance. This is a criminal matter. We have evidence of a clear, deliberate pattern of financial exploitation. Your client canceled the wedding after coercing my client to fund a $400,000 event and transfer a significant asset, and she did so within the window where she could escape legal responsibility for her actions. She did not flee. She executed a perfectly timed financial exit strategy. She laid out the evidence, text by text, transfer by transfer. The room fell silent. Finally, the mediator turned to Sarah. "Ms. Jones, do you deny that the $250,000 down payment for the property came entirely from Mr. Harper's premarital investment accounts?" Sarah finally broke. The mask slipped. "He promised it was a gift. He told me I deserved it after planning the wedding. I spent months planning his stupid wedding, and that was it." That single, petulant admission. "He promised it was a gift," destroyed her case. A conditional gift given in contemplation of marriage must be returned if the marriage does not occur. The fact that she claimed it as a gift, not a mutually earned asset, sealed her fate. The judge ordered the full title of the house to be transferred back to me, and crucially, ruled that Sarah had been unjustly enriched. She was required to pay me back the funds she had systematically siphoned from the joint account, minus her initial $1,000 contribution. In a final, beautiful twist of legal irony, since the entire Tuscan wedding and honeymoon was a prepaid expense, a conditional gift from me to her, and the condition, the marriage, was never met, the judge ruled that the vendors were to be sued by her, not me, for the recovery of the money. She, the person who unilaterally canceled the event, was now solely responsible for fighting with 15 different Italian vendors and a luxury hotel in Amalfi. The poetic justice of that alone was worth Eleanor's astronomical fee. I got the house back. I recovered nearly $180,000 in misappropriated funds. The ring, which she had thrown into the back of the car when she fled, was mailed to me a week later in a velvet box with no note. I sold it and donated the money to a domestic violence shelter. Sarah disappeared from my social circle, her reputation utterly ruined by the very public court documents and the sheer audacity of her scheme. I heard she eventually married Greg, though the wedding was a small, quiet affair in a civil registry office. I wish them the best, though I sincerely doubt I'll ever think about Sarah again without a deep, cold shiver of skepticism. My reflection, 3 years later, is not one of bitterness. It's one of deep, abiding calm. The betrayal was shocking, the humiliation was profound, but the lesson was invaluable. I learned that my methodical, strategic brain is my greatest asset. When faced with chaos, the key is not to panic emotionally, but to execute logically. The final irony, that entire ordeal, the $400,000 wedding loss, the legal fees, the emotional stress, it was a bargain. It was the price I paid to avoid a lifelong, disastrous marriage to a financial predator who, had we signed the papers, would have systematically taken half of everything I'd ever worked for. I got off cheap. I got off wise. And now I check the fine print on everything, from my business contracts to my dating apps. I am no longer just a trusting risk assessor. I am a survivor of an attempted hostile financial takeover. And you know what? That's a hell of a story to tell.